Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. As a reminder, there are spoilers for the chapters I'll be talking about. Also, there are timestamps in the description for where I start each chapter. And with that, let's get started. First up is My Hero Academia. It starts where I left off, with Nana getting ready to fight All For One. Deku recognizes her, but then starts worrying about Bakugo and the others. All For One notices Nana and starts mocking her, saying she is pathetic and incompetent. All For One says he's in the middle of a transplant, then starts monologuing about being haunted by those whose quirk he stole, saying he'd have nightmares of them and would get discouraged and wonder if he feels guilt for doing what he did, if he was even capable of it. But he continues, saying once he got rid of a quirk, the nightmares would also stop. He says that the doctor, his doctor, found out what the cause of this was. It would seem that quirks have a consciousness of their wielder, and because of him, or because of the nature of his quirk, he can access that consciousness. Shigaraki looks at Nana and remembers her, remembers Gran Torino saying for him to stop ruining her memory. He also remembers admiring her photo as a kid, then begins to ask why she was with the rest of his family, trying to stop him from fully becoming evil and embracing it. All For One continues saying how his brother seemingly also had a power that could meddle with the consciousnesses of quirks, and combined with the power stalking quirk is the reason why they're there, that One For All actually exists. All For One moves on, asking Nana if she'd like to say hello to Shigaraki. She then asks, or says more in a statement, that it's Shigaraki's her grandson. Shigaraki, however, is still angry at life and says he also hates her with all his heart. He then seems to attack her, but it's just that his emotions are affecting the world they're in. All For One is impressed, saying that Shigaraki's hate is breaking the rules of the world, which is that only One For All wielders can affect that world. All For One then remembers that Shigaraki hates him too, but doesn't mind, says it'll feed the new face of fear or terror. It doesn't end up working though, as the first user arrives to help. The first then asks if Shigaraki was next in line. All For One ignores him, stating that it's a shame that he wasn't able to make the first his. The first proclaims that they'll never go with him, and that they chose to stay with Deku. The first also seems to start pushing Shigaraki and All For One out of their world. Shigaraki even starts getting aggravated that he can't do anything, when All For One starts pushing back, saying if Shigaraki and him combine their power, they can steal it, because they're facing two people that All For One has beaten in the past, so there's nothing to worry about. And that he knows the truth because he's seen it through Shigaraki's eyes, and accuses his brother, the first, of bluffing about choosing Deku. All For One says that that the power is being wasted by Deku, saying he's weak and everyone keeps having to save him, and that he is like all might and giving into blind rage. He then finishes saying that giving the power to someone so worthless was a mistake. The first disagrees, saying that someone like One For All, who's extremely selfish, couldn't understand someone like Deku, who has a drive to save others like no one else. We see Deku dive forward as the first continues, saying that they will follow him, they will continue to follow Deku. We cut back to the real world, where we see a flash as a result of their fight inside of whatever spirit realm they were in. Both Deku and Shigaraki look awful. Deku is worried if his quirk is stolen, but realizes it's not, as it seems One For All is talking to Shigaraki still. One For All tells him that the quirk isn't fully settled inside of Shigaraki, and that he should retreat to live on and fight another day. Deku is practically begging to himself for Shigaraki to stay down and not get back up. We then cut to Gigantomachia and Co. seeing Dabi is excited that Shigaraki is fighting Endeavor, and says that they need to prepare. One of the Revolutionary Army guys is with them, I just don't remember what his job was, asks why they need to. Dabi proclaims it so that they can tear down the fake hero society. Mr. Compress asks Toga if she's fine with that, saying he's been on the lookout for the students she loves so much. Toga then says she wants to ask Deku and Uraraka where they draw the line, and if twice would have been someone they'd save, or will they kill her as well? That's more or less what she said. And that was the end of the chapter, seeing as how Toga will be playing some sort of major role in the next couple of chapters. The chapter was good, showing Shigaraki is not yet full strength and will most likely get away, having him train and so on, meaning that this arc will end how I thought it would, with Shigaraki just retreating and everything going back to how it was. The students training, the villains most likely going back underground for quite some time as he settles in. Not having the power of the doctor, he has to do it naturally now, so they'll end up not doing much for quite a while. Or they'll have it where some of his lieutenants now are becoming major villains, like Dabi goes out on an insane rampage or something. And we'll see where the story takes Toga from here, whether she turns and sides with the heroes, or whether she breaks fully, not liking the answer Uraraka and Deku give. We'll see. I just don't know. Overall, I'd give that chapter a B. Next up is Black Clover. It starts with us seeing Asta's devil, like full on, who says it's been forever since he was in the physical world. Asta asks if that was really what he looked like, and says he wanted to tell him something forever, for ages. Asta thanks him, which confuses everyone, Noct and the devil. He continues, saying that because of his power, it saved Asta numerous times. Asta thanks him again for allowing Asta to fight till then, giving him the ability to fight. The devil laughs, saying that he took Asta's arm, yet he's being thanked. Asta says that was part of the deal, and he has no regret, no complaints for it. That's what he gave up. The devil says Asta was an idiot, or is an idiot, and that he's going to kill him. Asta shouts that he can't let that happen when he remembers their last conversation where the devil called Asta shrimp. Asta then points out that the devil is also short, about the same height as Asta, saying he doesn't want to lose to someone so short, which is ironic. The devil calls him a fool, and that Asta doesn't understand the situation he is in. The devil then uses Asta's grimoire and grabs one of his swords. He then tells Asta he has no chance of winning. The devil then slams the sword on the ground, then slaps Asta with it, sending him flying. The devil says that he'll take all of Asta, not just an arm this time. Asta recovers, but says he doesn't want to fight, but Noct cuts in, telling him he has to, saying that if he loses, Asta will be taken over and turned into a monster. Noct continues, saying that all the skulls on the pillars that we see are those who failed to win, and if Asta fails, Noct will put him up there too. Asta then realizes this is forbidden magic and asks if they're doing something that they're not supposed to be doing. Noct says that they have 2 days to get stronger, continuing by asking Asta if he thought that he can get that strong in a legitimate fashion in such a short amount of time. Noct then finishes, saying that Asta chose this world when he wanted to get stronger with no magic at all. The devil attacks again. Noct asks what Asta's doing, and if he doesn't change what he's doing, he'll die. Asta then says no, and continues saying that the devil's not trying to kill Asta by his ki, knowing by his ki. Again, everyone is confused. Noct gets aggravated, saying no, devils have no principles. The devil then laughs after hesitating, agreeing with Noct, saying that all devils are scum. Asta, however, thinks that his devil is different from the one he fought in the war, just in general. The devil then shouts that he's going to steal Asta's body, but Asta says that just because he's a devil doesn't mean he's a bad guy. This causes the devil to remember someone who said the same thing in the past. Oh, and the devil seemed to get flustered when Asta said that. That was the chapter. It was a good chapter, and it looks like we're getting the backstory on the devil, and from how it looks, especially how the mangaka drew the woman that the devil remembered, it looks like we're also going to get Asta's backstory to some degree. We'll end up seeing Asta's mom, and that it would seem the devil's been watching over Asta from the beginning because of her, and we'll find out why that is in the next few chapters. Next few chapters will be very good, I'm guessing, just because the way he tells the story is very entertaining. But overall, I'd give that chapter a B. Next up is Jujutsu Kaisen. It starts with a flashback. After reading the whole chapter, I realized it was Kugasaki's friend who monologues in the beginning about having moved to Kugasaki's village. She got a different colored backpack and she monologues about it for a hot minute. We then cut to Kugasaki wanting to trade backpacks with the narrator. I don't think they do say her name towards the very end, but I don't remember it. So she'll just be dubbed the narrator. The narrator doesn't want to trade, however, and then we cut seeing that she then says, the narrator, that she got it back by the end of the day, but they did trade for the day. And then the narrator continues saying that after that day, Kugisaki hung out with her often. Kugisaki also said that in their village, it was harder to be a stranger than to make friends, which the narrator thinks is a good thing until later in her life when she's older, when an embarrassing moment happens, showing that you have no secrets in the village. Kugisaki ends up bringing the narrator to a secret base she found, which Kugisaki says she's going to live there, which confuses the narrator, as Kugisaki can go from saying something mature to something like a child, and especially when she finds out that the secret base is just someone else's house. The owner's actually happy to see them and welcomes them in. The narrator explains that person moved to the village after the narrator, and has always greeted their random visits with a smile. She continues, saying that the homeowner, Sayori, was always at home, and that Kugisaki changed after meeting Sayori, becoming more refined and softer. As time went on, Sayori wasn't as welcome to the village as the narrator, and her house was vandalized often, it would seem, to the point where Sayori and her family ended up moving, causing Kugisaki to be very upset and cry, which shocked the narrator, who didn't even know that she could cry. We then cut to Kugisaki leaving the village for Tokyo. As they're saying goodbye, the narrator is sad that Kugisaki isn't crying for their separation, but Kugisaki then says that when they next meet, it'll be all three of them, not forgetting their friend they made when they were very young. She says this as Kugisaki is holding back tears. This causes basically both of them to cry as they say goodbye. We then cut to Sayori, who's just living her life. She's seemingly at work as an editor of some kind, maybe a newspaper or something, as she's still at work late into the night. She then tells more or less the story of how she met Kugisaki and her friend, to a co-worker who's also there, and hopes that Kugisaki is still safe. We then cut back to Kugisaki, who reminisces about how she thought her village was crazy, knowing that it wasn't true, but crazy people tend to be loud, and they seem to butt into people's lives. She then remembers her friends, her trio of Itadori and Megumi and Gojo, and then the other ones, the panda, the glasses girl, who also might be dead by this arc. I don't know if she lived or not, and another one. And we then see her with her childhood friend, the narrator, and she apologizes to her, saying that she won't be able to keep her promise. We then cut back to real time, as she asks Itadori to tell everyone it wasn't so bad, as we see that Mahito takes his chunk of flesh from her face where he touched, which seems to blow off that portion of her either left or right side of her face, which causes her eye to fall out. So it was a really big hit. The last thing we see is Itadori just stunned. And that was the chapter. I hope Itadori just goes off in the next chapter, just goes ballistic to some degree, and finally gets rid of and kills Mahito, just because that's what would make sense. It was a good backstory, giving Kugisaki some rounded arcness. She's been with us from pretty much the beginning, so this was just added stakes. It did feel like the typical giving the character that's going to die a backstory to garner sympathy angle, but I don't even think she's necessarily dead. I wouldn't actually even be surprised if she lived and is just sort of disfigured. She seems too powerful to just die from one hit, but I don't know. We'll end up seeing in the next few chapters whether that's true or not after Itadori wins the fight. But overall, I'd give that chapter a B. Now we're on to Undead Unluck. And it starts where it left off, with Andy and Fuko taking Apocalypse and telling Billy that without it, he cannot do anything. But as Andy is talking, Apocalypse floods Fuko's mind with memories and visions of the past, showing a bunch of stuff of past members, of different events that happened with the Union, and most of them look like victories in it, or Victor, Andy's alternate ego that he hides behind the card in his head. Because of the memories, Fuko drops Apocalypse, who says that he has more years under his belt than any of the other artifacts, and he has the memories to prove it. He hopes Fuko goes insane and tries to escape, but Phil grabs him. We find out that his power is unfeeling, or unfeel, so he is unaffected by Apocalypse, and he asks Phil to get them out of there too, but Shen comes by and grabs them with Kitanoi, or Kinto cloud. It's like the Nimbus cloud from Dragon Ball or Journey to the West type stories, that same type of cloud, which even Andy jokingly asks how he's able to ride it. Billy says that they can keep the book for now, but he'll get it back by the deadline, continuing that they will get the arc first, no matter what. Andy asks if Shen knows what he's talking about, which Shen says no. Rip says things are getting pretty fun as the Under escape with the round table. Andy asks if they should go after them, but Juiz says no. Juiz says that she has something that she wants to discuss with everyone and to meet on the ground as several were up in the air. Juiz asks for a damage report where Nico says that it wasn't as bad as they feared, but if the fighting kept going, things would have been much worse. Juiz sees that they are all assembled. She then asks if Fuko's okay, which Andy then asks Nico what's the update, and Nico says that she'll be fine, and the human mind is incredible. And after a while, she'll settle back down. Juiz apologizes anyway, and Andy asks why she's been very passive on the missions, on the quests, asking why they only look for strong things and they don't care about completing all the quests to try to delay Apocalypse's finish. Whatever it is, completing the tablet that'll doom them all, with Ragnarok coming. Shen then also asks why she was so familiar with Victor when Victor first showed up, and how when he talked to Victor, Victor had asked what the day of the week it was, and didn't really care about the time, the date, which made it seem like he had already lived through their timeline. Nico then asks about the arc, as he had no records of it at all. Juiz then takes off her helmet, which puts Andy on edge. She then says they're safe as long as they don't answer a question from her about their justice. She then says that they need to know something about the world, and then she says that the world is on a loop, that it keeps getting destroyed, remade over and over again, and that she made the Union to try to stop that. Everyone's stunned. Andy is about to ask why she is the only one who knows about it, but Fuko cuts him off, asking if the memory she's seeing is of before things were remade, of a previous timeline. Juiz says yes, and that history is of her inadequacy as a leader. Fuko denies that, saying that without her, they'd be in trouble, but Juiz cuts her off, saying that because of her failure before, she has now collected the strongest warriors and weapons at the cost of multiple deaths. Juiz then proclaims that she assembled negators capable of killing God, very confidently, and so on. And that was the chapter. It was a good chapter. It was the ending of the arc, so we'll end up seeing where it goes from here. After this week, will it start the next one? We'll just keep going here for a little while, I don't know, but we'll end up seeing. It'll be interesting to learn where it goes from here. If we get more backstory on the previous loop, on Juiz, on Victor, I don't know. We'll also end up seeing many of the other negators, I think. We'll start learning more about them, not just Andy and Fuko, from here on out. So, we'll see. I'd give that chapter a B. Next up is We Never Learn. It starts with Noriyuki dreaming about Asami when Asami wakes him up wearing a maid outfit. She teases him as he freaks out. She then tells him that she made breakfast. We then see them eating breakfast, and they seem to have lived together for quite a while at that point. Noriyuki's eating, and Asami reminds him that he better eat and be ready because they're going to be late. He then gets up and tries to just leave, but he is forgetful and forgets his tie. She remembers and puts the tie on him. She then asks if he is forgetting something else, which he initially says no, but then after she starts pouting, he does remember and then gives her a kiss. They make their way to the school and arrive when Shima, the student who's been liking Noriyuki from the beginning after Noriyuki helped her, says hello and asks if his injuries are healed, which he then says yes, he's all healed up. She then says she wouldn't know what to do without him, and if he ever needs her or something, he can always go to her if he needs help. Asami gets aggravated by this after she clings on to Noriyuki, and Asami grabs her by the ponytail that she's wearing and tells her to stop flirting with her man, as Noriyuki is just very confused. The older teachers are glad he's okay, and two other older teachers suggest they throw a party at the beach later that night to celebrate his recovery. Both Noriyuki and Asumi just know it's an excuse for them to get drunk. We then see that party, where Asumi's parents are also there. Her dad wonders when it was that Asumi told them she was serious about becoming a doctor. He admits he wasn't very encouraging to her because of his own doubts of being a doctor and his want to keep the darker side of his profession away from her. He realized that it was just his fear, and he never thought his daughter would teach him a lesson about being a doctor. Her mom then says that Asumi will be a fine doctor one day. Her dad agreed, saying he has to keep up with her. We then see the two teachers who suggested the party be completely drunk and forget why they were holding the party. Then they think it's because Asumi and Noriyuki are having a baby, which causes Noriyuki and Asumi to freak out, saying no, they're not, and explain that the party's for Noriyuki's recovery. And Asumi ends up saying that they're not having a baby yet. That causes Asumi's dad to do his usual weird thing where he barges in saying yet, but you have plans to do so, and he wants to name the baby, and he butts in a lot. The mom laughs at the craziness, and we then cut to Asumi and Noriyuki alone somewhere, having escaped her dad's wrath. She says he never changes, but Noriyuki finds it reassuring that he doesn't. She calls him Kohai once again, which he sort of pouts at her for. She then gets flustered and apologizes, saying she's not used to it yet, and says his name, embarrassingly. We then see Noriyuki smile teasingly, as he was just having some fun, which then Asumi, flustered, and tackles him to the ground, saying he can't turn the tables on her like that. She then confesses she was very scared during the surgery, and that the pressure of his life in her hands was crushing, remembering all the things her dad said to dissuade her from being a doctor. But she ends up saying she was very glad she got to choose medicine, and thanks him for being alive. He then proposes to her, asking if she'll marry him, saying he was planning in the future to take over her dad's clinic with her, but he realizes what was most important was to never leave her side again. She then she brings up saying, back to the earlier topic and meaning of having a baby, she ends up saying she also wants one of them too. As Noriyuki's about to say, wanting a baby, she stutters, flustered, and saying that she wants it in the future, as she's still training to be a doctor. The chapter then ends with them kissing under the sky. It was a good chapter. It was cute with how it ended. It was a good ending overall. It was a good arc. Next week, we'll start the final arc of the entire series, I think. And we'll see if that arc is as good as this one, because I actually found this one very enjoyable overall. It was much better than the last one, and I might put it as the first one of these ending arcs. Then you could put probably the more Canada one with the swimming girl as second, Rizu at third, and the astronomer as last, as her arc just annoyed me. So here's hoping the next arc will be just as fun as this one, or it'll be really weird and not so great. I don't know. But overall, I'd give that chapter a B. Next up is Mashle, Magic, and Muscles. It starts with the after effect of Mashle's punch, as Abel is seemingly falling backward. Abel then casts a spell called Marianus Change, making someone a puppet, pretty much. We see that nothing at first happens, so Mash is confused, but he then starts turning into a puppet and turns full stop into one. Abel is then impressed with Mash, saying he didn't think he needed to use that spell on him. He then continues, saying when he looks at Mash, he sees an unusually clever rabbit, but a rabbit all the same. He says he's going to take the coin, and that Mash was good sport for a rabbit, but a rabbit is a rabbit, and could never threaten a wolf. Abel pulls out something from Mash's robe, thinking it was the coin, but it seems it was a cream puff, which confuses him. Then, out of nowhere, Mash somehow reverted back to normal and uppercutted Abel, getting his cream puff back, saying it was hidden in his robe, and he was confused why it was out, because he doesn't remember. The fifth fangirl is grossed out that the cream puff was in his robe. Abel is confused by how Mash got out of being a puppet, explaining that his puppets block signals from his brain to the body, giving Abel full control. He then realizes that it was a spinal reflex which canceled Abel's puppet magic, but spinal reflex is just that. The body's natural reaction to danger, like putting your hand on an oven, your hand backs off without you thinking about it, because it's your body's natural instinct to avoid harm. So for it to happen for Mash, he must have considered the taking of his cream puff to be an extreme threat, that his body just reacted without him even thinking about it. The fifth fangirl freaks out as she and Abel realize that the cream puff is that important to him. Abel then says Mash put up a worthy struggle, but says he'll crush Mash with his ultimate magic, his ultimate spell. The spell is a massive puppet that turns anything that has strings touch into a puppet itself within 100 meters, I think. The strings are so thin, no one can see them, and Mash starts to turn into a puppet as he says this. The monster puppet attacks Mash, and as it does, Abel tells Mash that he respects him for a rabbit and that he was a worthy challenger, but the weak are still weak. In all his usual rhetoric, the monster puppet keeps attacking, and Abel starts to thank Mash for showing him that he became too prideful and needs to step up, more or less, and take things more seriously. When both he and the puppet stop moving, we then see that the monster puppet's hands are gone, broken, and we see that Mash is okay and broke all of them off. He then apologizes for interrupting and asks if Abel was thanking him, as he couldn't quite hear. This causes Abel to pause, asking why Mash isn't a puppet. Mash explains that he cut the strings. Abel says that's not possible, and that no human could do that, when the fifth fangirl cuts in and says she is going to explain what she saw, which was that Mash moved his left arm higher up his body as he ducked down. So when the strings hit that left arm, he was able to react and cut the strings off with his right hand before he lost the ability to move his right hand. The fifth fangirl is sweating profusely by this, thinking it's not possible and that Mash has the instincts of a wild beast. Abel also starts sweating, believing Mash to be inhuman. Mash then asks what's wrong, saying, quote unquote, "You're sweating, ... little rabbit." Just the taunting from Mash in this is surprisingly excellent for someone who's so, I don't even know the right word, but it's really funny that he taunts a lot. That gets a chuckle out of Abel as he says he's funny, or he says very funny to Mash as he sends monster puppet barreling headfirst towards Mash. Mash, however, smashes it into 1,000 pieces. Abel's then stunned and starts to consider that he might have been the rabbit as Mash grabs him and hits him with Erector Spina magic Hellfall, which is just a sit-out powerbomb, driving Abel's head into the ground, smashing the ground. And that was the chapter. It was a fun chapter. The fight ends with a dominating win by Mash, which, I mean, I expected it. It's One Punch Man. Mash doesn't struggle ever, so it'll be ridiculous. Next week and the following weeks will be very funny to see what type of shenanigans the whole gang gets into. And I really hope it's like Ippo, where every other chapter when they're training before a match, it's random shenanigans that the whole gang gets into. And I really hope Mashle follows that guideline, where we just see them hanging out as they get stronger, doing classes and so on, and not necessarily always having to fight the new bad guy of the week. I think it would be funny. I think it works for the series, but we'll end up seeing. Overall, I'd give that chapter a B. Last up is Chainsaw Man. And it starts with Chainsaw Man in a room, I think where he left off, where he killed the other two devils, and he's just standing there, where we see the flamethrower devil blast from the floor below. However, Chainsaw Man gets away unscathed, only to be hit by the whip devil just as Chainsaw Man's about to attack. As he notices the whip devil, the bomb devil blasts through the building they're standing on, or above, and grabs the Chainsaw Man, blasting him up a little bit higher. Chainsaw Man then cuts her when the spear devil starts throwing spears at him, impaling him in a couple of places. Makima, from wherever she's standing, then points her fingers at Chainsaw, saying bang, which causes an explosion on Chainsaw, sending him going up into the atmosphere. She says she blasts him so many times. She then wonders how long he can hold his breath, only to find him removing his heart and throwing it back at the earth like a baseball. He ends up growing back from the heart, seemingly transporting there, and once back in orbit, he outstretches his chains, grabbing the 4 remaining devils fighting him. He brings them up to his level, where he's at up in the air, and cuts all 4 of them, and that's the chapter. It's a very fight-heavy chapter, but it's very good. It just shows how unbelievably overpowered Chainsaw Man is compared to everyone else. It was a fun chapter. It'll be interesting to see where it goes from here, as Makima's most likely not dead from that attack, seeing as how she still has her deal with the Prime Minister, keeping her from dying. But the others, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they somehow were still all alive and they get up. And then we see that the fight continues until the point where Chainsaw Man's struggling, and we see Makima's plan continue to unfold, or she simply runs away from here, and we see wherever this story is going, which in truth, I have no idea. It'll be good. It'll be interesting to see where it goes from here and in the next few weeks, but I certainly can't predict where it's going. But we'll end up seeing. And I'd give that chapter overall an A. With that, that's all the chapters. They were all good overall. Nothing super mind-blowing. My Hero's reaching the end of its arc, and we'll see where it goes from here. That'll be the more interesting part, like how One Piece, the best parts of its arc, always come at the aftermath. My Hero tends to be in a similar boat, so soon enough My Hero might start picking back up again. For me, anyway. From what I can gather, the fan reaction to it all is very high. I'm just simply tired of it. Personally, I don't know. It just hasn't hooked me as much as I thought it would. Black Clover is starting its backstory arc, which should be fun, seeing some personality come from the devil, as we also see more of Asta's backstory as well, where he came from as a whole. We also have One Piece coming back next week, and it being a short week overall. Hopefully all the chapters are very good. But with that being said, I hope you enjoyed watching my ramblings, as if you did, leave a like. It helps me at least know that I'm doing a good job and that people are enjoying these. And as always, thank you for watching.